The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like a tired hornet. The walls of Belrose Medical Center's waiting room were a muted beige, the kind of color that made people feel unwelcome without knowing why. Chairs sat in neat rows, mostly empty, except for a few coughing and fidgeting souls, their eyes darting to the reception desk every few minutes as if waiting to be acknowledged. On the far side sat linNally, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his early 30s. His hoodie was faded, jeans dusty from a long walk in the summer heat. He clutched a worn leather satchel and kept one hand resting on the back of the young boy next to him. Caleb, his 7-year-old son, whose wheezing could be heard over the occasional coughs of other patients. A nurse emerged from the back door. "Mr. Mendez?" she called, glancing around the room. An older white man with a cane slowly stood, guided by a younger woman. Brendel looked at Caleb, wiping sweat from the boy's brow. "We've been here since 8 o'clock, he whispered to himself. It was now 10:42. The receptionist, Jeanette, finally glanced their way. "Sir," she said flatly, "I told you already we need insurance or a card on file before we can put you on the intake list." Brendel stepped forward. "I'm wornally on it. I left a voicemail with Caleb's new Medicaid case manager. We just moved from Georgia." Jeanette sighed. "Until it's verified, we can't hold the spot. But he's having trouble breathing." She looked up, almost annoyed. "Sir, if it's an emergency, you need to go to the ER. This is a private practice. We don't do walk-ins without insurance." "I don't have a car," Brendel replied, trying to remain calm. "And I already called ahead. They told me to come here, said Dr. Rathborn might see him anyway." Her demeanor froze at the name. "Dr. Rathborn doesn't take cases like this." Behind her, a glass door swung open. "Who doesn't take what?" a sharp voice interjected. Dr. Henry Rathborn, in his late 50s, with snow-white hair and a stethoscope that gleamed like it had never touched real pain, emerged. He was known throughout the city, the miracle mind, they called him, specialist in pediatric respiratory disorders. But his reputation was double-edged, and the side Brendel was beginning to see wasn't printed in magazines. "This man brought his son in without insurance," Jeanette explained, gesturing with a pen like she was swatting at a fly. Dr. Rathborn eyed Brendel up and down. "I don't run a charity ward," he said. "Send them to County General." "He can't breathe," Brendel said, stepping in front of his son. "He needs a nebulizer at least. And I need a verified payment method before I touch a patient," Rathborn retorted. "Next time, think ahead before dragging a sick child across state lines." Brendel clenched his jaw, keeping his tone steady. "Look, I'm not here begging. I'll pay out of pocket if I have to. Just let someone check his lungs." But Rathborn had already turned away. Jeanette scribbled something on a post-it and stuck it to her monitor. "If your insurance isn't active by tomorrow, maybe try the clinic on 42nd. Brendel stood in the middle of the lobby, stunned. Caleb's wheeze cracked into a cough. People looked, then looked away. That's when someone else stepped out from the hallway, a nurse with warm eyes and dark skin, mid-40s, curly hair tied back in a bun. Her name badge read, Nurse Ayanna Pierce. "I'll take a quick listen," she said softly, kneeling next to Caleb. "Don't waste your time, Ayanna," Rathborn barked from the hallway. "Policy's clear." But Ayanna ignored him. She placed her stethoscope on the boy's chest. Her brow furrowed. "His airway is restricted. He needs intervention." "I know," Brendel muttered, eyes misting. "Come with me," she said. "We'll use the teaching wing. It's under the student clinic, no billing needed." Brendel hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Just walk fast," she whispered. But what Ayanna didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone had been watching. And that by helping Brendel and his son, she had just triggered a chain of events that. The hallway leading to the teaching wing was narrow and dimly lit, with old college flyers peeling from the walls and the faint smell of antiseptic hovering in the air. Nurse Ayanna walked briskly, glancing over her shoulder now and then, her white sneakers whispering against the tile. Brendel followed close behind, clutching Caleb to his chest as the boy coughed weakly into his hoodie. "This way," Ayanna said, pushing through a half-stuck door. "It used to be for med students, now it's mostly empty." They entered a small exam room with an aging oxygen machine in the corner. A cracked poster about asthma triggers hung crookedly over the sink. Ayanna guided Caleb to sit on the exam table and pulled a portable nebulizer from a wall cabinet. "I'll need to borrow this," she murmured to herself as she prepared the saline solution and set the mask over Caleb's face. The hissing hum of the machine filled the room, and slowly Brendel watched his son's chest rise and fall with more ease. "You're saving him," Brendel said, voice catching. Ayanna didn't look up. I'm doing what should have been done 2 hours ago. Pause. Thank you, Brendel whispered. She turned to him, her face tense. You shouldn't have had to beg. I just didn't know who else to turn to, he said. We moved here to start over. I had a job lined up in 2 weeks. We're in a motel right now. Ayana's eyes softened. Where you from? Albany, Georgia. She nodded. I was born in Columbus. My mama would have skinned Rathborn alive if she saw how he treated you just now. That made Brendel chuckle weakly. But outside the door, unknown to them, Dr. Rathborn stood stiff, his hand on the knob. He had followed them. Back upstairs, the tension simmered behind closed doors. I told you she pulled them into the student wing, Jeanette whispered to Rathborn. She's overstepping again, he muttered, jaw clenched. Time and again she brings that bleeding heart into my practice. Should I call security? He shook his head, linNally. No, not yet. Let her finish. If that boy crashes here, it'll be on her. Jeanette hesitated. Should I file a report? No, he said. I'll handle it my way. Meanwhile in room 204, Caleb's breathing steadied and color slowly returned to his face. Ayana sat beside him, jotting notes in a clipboard she'd pulled from a forgotten shelf. You'll need a follow-up. You mentioned Medicaid, right? She asked. Yes, ma'am, Brendel said. It's pending activation. I've got all the paperwork in this bag. He pulled out a folder worn at the edges, packed with birth certificates, old prescriptions, and a hospital bill from Georgia that hadn't yet been paid off. Ayana's eyes paused on one page. What's this? She asked, pointing. That's from Memorial Hospital back home. Caleb was part of a pilot treatment program. They said it was linNally, some new genome-targeted drug that stabilized his symptoms. Ayana's eyes widened. Wait, is that program called Care? Yeah, Brendel nodded. That's the one. Why? She stood abruptly and walked to the wall, pulling out an old binder labeled Research Patients Archive. Flipping through the yellowing pages, she found it. Belrose had partnered with Memorial Hospital on that same trial. And the lead consultant on the program? Dr. Henry Rathborn. Ayana turned slowly. Did you know, she asked, that Rathborn has published 3 papers bragging about the success of that program? Brendel shook his head. Your son's data, his name, is probably in those results. If he was one of the successful cases, they used his medical record to get federal funding. Wait, what? And he just acted like we didn't exist? Ayana's voice dropped. He probably didn't remember. But if he did. A loud knock jolted them. It was Rathborn. He pushed the door open, lips tight, eyes flashing. You're not authorized to treat patients in this wing, Nurse Pierce. Ayana stood tall. I used the student equipment. There's no cost. No violation. You're on my payroll. This is insubordination. Ayana folded her arms. And refusing to treat a child in respiratory distress is malpractice. Rathborn glanced at Caleb, who looked up at him from the table. Then at Brendel, who met his eyes without flinching. Your son, Rathborn said coolly, will need a referral to a state clinic. I suggest you leave before this becomes a bigger issue. Ayana stepped forward. You don't remember him, do you? What? Caleb Nally. Care trial. Georgia. You used his case in your second publication. Rathborn's face paled for the first time. I remember all my patients, he lied. Ayana walked to the counter, flipped Caleb's record toward him. Then why is his signature on your 2021 funding report? Brendel stepped forward. You used my boy like a trophy. But today when he needed you most, you slammed the door in his face. Rathborn's jaw tensed. Ayana spoke again. You've got 2 options, doctor. Help him properly. Or I send this file to the Department of Health and Human Services. Let them investigate your entire trial history. A silence filled the room. Then Rathborn turned and walked out without a word. Back in the lobby, Jeanette leaned over to Rathborn as he returned. Everything okay? He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his office door and slammed it shut behind him. But something else was happening now. From the hallway, a young intern named Marcus Lynn, who'd overheard every word outside the whisper room, opened his phone. He began typing. And with one press of a button, he sent a message that would set the entire clinic into a spiral. Thread. What happens when the miracle mind doctor refuses to treat a child whose medical success he once claimed for funding? Let's talk. Thread # Belrose exposed. Back in the exam room. Ayana glanced at her watch. You should go now. You've got about 5 minutes before Rathborn sends someone to remove you. Brendel looked torn. What about Caleb's meds? I'll write a list. Go to Alcare on 38th. Tell them Nurse Ayana sent you. They'll help. She scribbled quickly on a pad and handed it to him. Then she knelt next to Caleb. You're a brave little man. Keep breathing deep, okay? Caleb nodded, tired but grateful. Ayana looked at Brendel. You ever think about lacNally out? He hesitated. Ain't nobody gonna listen to a broke father from Georgia. Ayana smiled faintly. They will now. She turned her screen toward him. On it was Marcus Lynn's tweet, already being reposted with furious speed. Let's just say, Ayana said, the internet has a special place for hypocrisy. Brendel stared at it, then down at Caleb. But what none of them knew, what even Ayana didn't yet suspect, was that Dr. Rathborn had more to hide than anyone imagined. And now that a spotlight was beginning to shine, the shadows would begin to stir. By the time Brendel and Caleb stepped out into the blazing afternoon sun, Belrose Medical Center was already on fire. Digitally, anyway. The tweet from Marcus Lynn had exploded. What started as a single thread had grown into a cascade of screenshots, comments from former patients, and quiet employees adding anonymous confirmation. I was in the same trial and got ghosted after the funding came through. My son's name is in that study and we've never seen a dime. Rathborn refused to see my nephew because he was on state insurance. Where there's smoke, there's billing fraud. The hashtag Belrose Exposed was now trending across the city. Inside his office, Dr. Rathborn stared at his phone, blood drained from his face. Each refresh brought a new wave of fury. His assistant had knocked 3 times already, warning that reporters were calling. He ignored her. The center's board of directors would be alerted within the hour. There would be questions. Investigations. But Rathborn wasn't just lacNally, he was angry. He knew who started this. Ayana Pierce. Brendel sat on the edge of the motel bed later that night, still in the same jeans and hoodie. Caleb was asleep, his breathing much better after the nebulizer treatment. The paper bag with prescriptions from Alcare sat on the dresser, a reminder that compassion still existed in corners of the city. But Brendel's mind was spinning. He scrolled through his phone. There was the tweet. Over 40,000 shares. Someone had even tagged a local news station. He tapped the message icon. Ayana Pierce. Just check lacNally in. Caleb okay? Brendel. He's asleep. Thank you. What happens next? Ayana. I don't know. But I think we just opened a door neither of us can close. He put his phone down and rubbed his temples. He hadn't asked for any of this. All he wanted was someone to treat his son with dignity. The next morning, Belrose's leadership council convened. Around the long glass table sat 6 executives in suits, each one lacNally tenser than the last. Rathborn stood at the head, papers in hand, lips pursed. This smear campaign is unfounded, he said. A disgruntled nurse broke protocol and then turned to social media. One board member, a sharp-eyed black woman named Celeste Monroe, crossed her arms. I read the thread, Henry. Your name is on multiple government grant documents tied to AstraCare, using children's names, none of whom were ever compensated, consulted, or given follow-ups. It was a research agreement, with a clause that mandated post-trial care, which you didn't provide. Rathborn set his jaw. I am a physician, not a social worker. That clause was flexible. Another board member muttered, the State Ethics Committee won't agree with that. Rathborn threw his papers down. So what now? You fire me over internet outrage. Celeste stood. No. But we suspend you until an internal review is complete. You can't be serious. This is about a child who almost suffocated in your waiting room, Henry, while you argued about insurance. Meanwhile, Ayana had been called into a HR meeting. A man in a gray tie and nervous smile greeted her. Ayana, I'm going to be blunt. You violated clinic protocol. We're required to log and bill all patients seen on the property. I acted within the ethical standards of my license, she said firmly. The child needed care. He had a known respiratory diagnosis. I administered a legal and recorded intervention. Be that as it may, the publicity around this situation is lacNally things difficult. Is this a warning? It's a notice of investigation. Ayana chuckled bitterly. So the man who refused care gets suspended, and the woman who gave it gets punished. The HR rep looked down. Please sign here to acknowledge the meeting. She signed, then stood. You're going to hear more stories like Brendel's, she said before leaving, and you'll have to decide if this place treats patients or protects power. Later that evening, Brendel got a DM from a local news anchor. Hi Mr. lacNally, my name is Leah Stanton from Channel 8. I'd love to talk to you about your son's experience at Belrose. Your story is opening eyes across the city. Would you be open to a short interview? Brendel hesitated. He'd never been in the spotlight. He worked with his hands, construction, wiring, fixing what was broken. But maybe that's what this was. Maybe this was fixing something broken too. 2 days later, Brendel stood outside Belrose Medical Center in a clean shirt and jeans, Caleb beside him, clutching his hand. Cameras were already set up. Leah smiled warmly as they mic'd him up. "Just speak from the heart," she said. He took a breath. "My name is lacNally. I came here last week because my son couldn't breathe. We just moved, we didn't have insurance yet, but we had hope. And this place turned us away like we were dirt." He paused, squeezing Caleb's hand. What they didn't know was that my son had already helped them. His name was used in a study they bragged about. But when we needed them, they forgot us. Leah asked, "What do you want from this?" "Change," he said. "Not just for me and Caleb, but for every black parent who's had to explain why their kid doesn't deserve to be turned away. We're not invisible. And we won't stay quiet anymore." That night the interview aired. It was raw, unpolished, but that made it real. The internet did the rest. lacNally is every father. This story broke me. How many children are being used for funding and then discarded? This nurse deserves a medal. Shut Belrose down. Ayana's photo was shared with the caption, "The nurse who stood up." But not everyone was happy. The next morning, a note appeared under Ayana's windshield. "Stay out of things that aren't yours. People like you never know when to stop." No signature. Just typed words on a torn piece of printer paper. Ayana froze. She looked around the nearly empty garage. Her heart pounded. Meanwhile, Brendel received a call from a blocked number. He answered. Silence. Then a voice. "You've said enough, Mr. Nally. If you care about your boy, let this die." Click. That evening, Ayana met Brendel in a quiet corner of a coffee shop. She slid the paper across the table. He slid his phone across in return. "I think they're scared," she said. "Good," Brendel replied. "They should be." Ayana looked at him. "You ever think this would go this far?" "No," he said. "But I'm not lacNally down now." A TV above the counter flickered to a lacNally news alert. State Health Department opens formal investigation into Belrose Medical Center following viral scandal. But just as Ayana smiled, her phone buzzed with a new notification, one that made her heart sink. She showed Brendel the screen. Dr. Henry Rathborn scheduled for live interview tomorrow at 9 a.m. The truth behind the Belrose controversy, exclusive sit-down with Channel 12. She looked at Brendel. "They're going to spin this. Make it about him." Brendel stared at the screen. "Then we tell the truth louder." The morning sun spilled into Brendel's motel room like a stage spotlight. It was 8:52 a.m. On the TV, Channel 12's morning anchor, Cynthia Lang, smiled into the camera. "Up next, we speak exclusively with the man at the center of the Belrose controversy, Dr. Henry Rathborn." Brendel sat at the edge of the bed, remote in hand. Caleb lay beside him with a bowl of cereal in his lap, too young to fully understand what was happening, but smart enough to feel the tension in the room. Ayana sat on the armchair nearby, scrolling through Twitter. "This man's about to spin it," she muttered. The screen changed. There he was. Dr. Rathborn. Clean-shaven. Navy suit. Blue silk tie. A calm, almost presidential aura. "Cynthia. Doctor, thank you for joining us." Rathborn. "Thank you, Cynthia. I've remained silent for days because I wanted to listen. But now it's time to share the truth." "Cynthia, let's address the main concern. A viral story claims you refused to treat a child whose medical history helped fund your research. Is this true?" Rathborn sighs. "What's true is that we've built a world-class facility that helps thousands of children every year. But we have policies, procedures. We don't deny care, we simply follow the system." "Cynthia, the child's father says otherwise." Rathborn, "I sympathize with his situation. But what the public didn't see is the context. This man showed up without documents, demanded immediate service, and caused a disruption. We can't let emotions override professional protocols." Cynthia, "And the accusation about using trial data without consent?" Rathborn, "The AstraCare trial followed federal guidelines. Consent was obtained. And all patients were advised to follow up with their local physicians post-trial. We have documentation." Ayana stood abruptly. "He's lying." Brendel clenched his jaw. "He's turning Caleb into a disruption now?" She grabbed her phone. "We need to answer this. Now. Within minutes, #BelroseExposed had a counter hashtag. #StandWithRathborn. Fueled by medical professionals defending policy, conservative voices painting Brendel as entitled, and think pieces about overwhelmed healthcare systems. One viral post read, "Sad story, but you can't just walk into a top medical center and demand VIP treatment without insurance. There's a process." Rathborn followed it. Ayana's hands trembled as she typed. He didn't ask for VIP treatment. He asked for help for his child. And the doctor who used that child's data for fame acted like he was garbage. If you're okay with that, your soul needs lacNally. Her post went viral again, but the backlash had begun. Later that day in a public library downtown, Ayana met Marcus Lin, the intern who started the original thread. He laid down a file. "I got this from a med student friend. It's internal." Brendel opened it. Inside were emails between Rathborn and Memorial Hospital, dated a year ago. One line stood out. The Georgia patients were ideal. High success rate, clean medical profiles, unlikely to follow up due to interstate mobility. Funding secured. Brendel stared. "So he counted on us disappearing," he said. Marcus nodded. "And now that you came back into view, he's trying to cover it all." Ayana's face hardened. "We have proof now. We go public. Again." Brendel glanced at Caleb's school tablet, buzzing with games. "I don't want." The next morning, Ayana stood at a podium outside Belrose Medical Center. To her left was Brendel. To her right, two former AstraCare trial parents who had since come forward. Microphones. Cameras. Reporters. She took a breath. "My name is Ayana Pierce. I've been a nurse for 19 years. I've held the hands of dying children, delivered diagnoses to terrified parents, and stood in rooms where no one else would speak the truth. I've never done anything for fame. I did it because it was right." She lifted a sheet of paper. This email is from Dr. Rathborn's own correspondence. It describes children as assets, not patients. It acknowledges funding gained through their results, and openly discusses their presumed disappearance. Reporters gasped. Brendel stepped forward. "I'm lacNally. I didn't come to New York to fight with doctors. I came to give my son a better life. But I won't let someone who used my child for grants paint us as burdens. We're people. My son is a human being. And today we're standing up for all the ones who didn't get to speak." Caleb stood beside him, holding a sign made of cardboard. "I'm not your data. I'm a child." Inside Belrose's top-floor conference room, the board was in crisis mode. "This is going national," Celeste Monroe said. "The State Ethics Committee has reached out. And now the Department of Health and Human Services is requesting all AstraCare files." Another board member added, "The email's legit. We confirmed it. We need to act." Rathborn was absent. Suspended, his access badge revoked. "What about the nurse?" someone asked. Celeste looked out the window watching the press conference below. "We promote her." That evening, Brendel returned to the motel to find an envelope taped to the door. Inside, a single sheet. Settlement agreement, Belrose Medical Center. Amount offered, $12,500. Conditions, full non-disclosure. No further statements. Signatures required within 48 hours. Brendel stared at it. He held it up to Ayana. "Is this their way of shutting us up?" She nodded. "If you sign it, the story ends. The investigation may fizzle." He folded it neatly, placed it on the counter, and lit a match. The letter curled black, edges turning to ash in the motel sink. That night, Brendel received another call. This one wasn't from an unknown number. It was Celeste Monroe. "Mr. Nally," she said, "I want to meet. Not as a board member. As a black mother who's tired of watching our children be statistics." He agreed. And as he hung up, a small smile broke across his face for the first time in days. He looked down at Caleb, sleeping peacefully, chest rising and falling without strain. But just as he turned off the lights, Ayana's phone buzzed with a new alert. Rathborn retains high-profile legal counsel, plans to sue Belrose for defamation. Brendel looked at her. "So, it's not over yet?" Ayana shook her head. "Not by a long shot." The early autumn wind swept through the city like a warning. At Belrose Medical Center, the staff walked quietly, heads down, pretending not to see the two news vans parked out front or the protesters gathering near the entrance with cardboard signs. "Health is a right, not a business. Stop selling our children's pain. Dr. Rathborn equals profit over people." Inside the clinic, silence weighed heavily. Rathborne's nameplate had been removed from the wall outside his office. Patients whispered about the doctor scandal, as nurses avoided eye contact with one another. But in a private conference room uptown, Rathborne sat with his new legal team, Danton, Bricks and O'Hara, corporate specialists, suits sharp as razors. One of them, a silver-haired man named Cliff Bricks, leaned forward. "You're not on trial," he said. "You're under attack in the court of public opinion. That's where we win." "And if the government audits my funding?" Rathborne asked, voice strained. "We'll shield you under the clinical judgment clause," Bricks said. "This is about narrative. Control it, and we can drown the noise." Rathborne's eyes burned with the same resentment he felt when Ayanna had stood up to him. "They're going to regret this," he said. Ayanna was now back on shift, but not quietly. Following her speech and the viral video of Brendel and Caleb, she'd been elevated to interim head nurse of community relations. The board had no choice. The public demanded accountability, and Ayanna had become the face of compassion. Her inbox was flooded with emails from parents, nurses, and even medical students across the country. "You made me want to be a better nurse. I was afraid to speak up until I saw your story. I'm one of the trial parents too. How can I help?" A movement was forming. Brendel had become a public figure too, unintentionally. After declining the settlement, he'd appeared on 2 podcasts, been invited to speak at a health equity summit, and had even received a job offer from a non-profit health advocacy group. But he hadn't accepted yet. "This isn't about building a brand," he told Ayanna one night. "I just want to make things right." She nodded. "Then let's finish what we started." 3 days later, Brendel received a knock at the motel room door. He opened it and blinked. It was Celeste Monroe, the board member. "Mind if I come in?" she asked. He nodded, clearing space. Celeste sat gently, glancing around the modest room. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "The trial files. The grant reports. Your interview. The settlement offer. And? We failed you. I failed you." Brendel stared at her. "You didn't sign that letter?" "No," she said. "But I was silent when it mattered. And now I want to help fix it." She pulled a folder from her bag. "This is a proposal. A real one. Not hush money. The board is prepared to fund a new initiative, the lacNally Pediatric Access Fund. It'll pay for uninsured children's respiratory treatment, no questions asked." Brendel was stunned. "There's one condition," she said. "You run it." But while change brewed on one end, retaliation festered on the other. Rathborne's lawyers filed a lawsuit: defamation, loss of income, personal damages. Target Belrose, Ayanna, and Brendel. It made the evening news. Famed physician sues whistleblowers in growing healthcare scandal. From hero to villain? Dr. Rathborne fights back. Brendel watched the headline scroll across the screen, Caleb curled in his lap. Ayanna walked in holding the newspaper. "You ready for this?" she asked. He took a deep breath. "Let's go to court." The courtroom was packed. Journalists, cameras, protesters outside with signs. Rathborne sat confidently with his attorneys. Ayanna and Brendel, seated beside a modest legal rep provided pro bono by a health justice org, kept their heads high. The judge, a steely black woman named Judge Renata Clay, glanced over her glasses at the room. "I will not allow this to become a circus," she warned. The trial began. Rathborne's team painted him as a brilliant physician under siege. A misunderstood hero. The victim of social media vigilantism. "He followed protocol," Bricks said. "He was protecting resources for the many, not pandering to the few." Then came Ayanna's turn. She took the stand. "I've worked in this field for nearly 2 decades, she said. "And I've never seen a child treated as callously as lacNally was that day." She explained the moment in the waiting room, the refusal, the nebulizer, and Rathborne's response. Then she held up the infamous email. "I don't need social media to tell me what that is," she said. "That's exploitation. Of a poor black child who had no idea his lungs were worth millions in research dollars." Murmurs filled the room. Judge Clay raised her hand. "Order." Brendel stood tall, suit borrowed from a friend. "My boy just needed to breathe," he said simply. "That's all." He told the story. How he'd come to the clinic with hope. How he'd been dismissed. How Ayanna stepped in when no one else would. Then he paused. "My son's life was a success story in a folder. But to them we were just numbers. Until we spoke up." He turned toward Rathborne. "You could have helped us. But you chose to walk away." Midway through the second day of trial, something unexpected happened. A new witness was called. Marcus Lynn, the intern who started the tweet storm. He brought with him a flash drive. "Your Honor," he said, "I have audio from a meeting between Dr. Rathborn and Jeanette Gills, the front desk supervisor, recorded a day after lacNally's visit." The court gasped. Judge Clay asked, "Do you have consent?" "Jeanette gave me permission to submit it." The audio played. Rathborn's voice. "Let her treat the boy. It won't matter. They're motel people. No one will believe them." Jeanette. "Should I delete the intake log?" Rathborn. "Scrub it. The trial's already published. No use letting them back in the system." Dead silence. Then pandemonium. Judge Clay struck her gavel. "Mr. Bricks," she said to Rathborn's attorney, "do you wish to withdraw the lawsuit before I file a formal inquiry for perjury and obstruction of federal research ethics?" Bricks leaned over to Rathborn, whispered furiously. Rathborn didn't speak. Bricks stood. "We withdraw." Reporters swarmed. Brendel shielded Caleb as Ayanna guided them toward a side exit. Someone shoved a mic in his face. "Brendel? Are you suing Dr. Rathborn back?" He paused. "No," he said. "That's not what this was about. We just wanted the truth." Ayanna smiled. "But the city's going to do what we couldn't, hold him accountable." Back at Belrose, the board voted unanimously to terminate Rathborn's contract and launch a full ethics audit of past research. Ayanna was offered a permanent executive role, but she turned it down. "I'd rather stay close to the patients," she said. And at a small press conference outside the newly named lacNally Pediatric Care Wing, Brendel spoke one last time. "We were poor. But we weren't powerless. That's the difference now." He looked down at Caleb, who tugged at his hand. "Daddy?" "Yeah, bud." Caleb smiled. "I want to be a doctor." Brendel laughed softly. "You will be." But as they posed for a photo in front of the new sign, Ayanna's phone buzzed with one final alert. lacNally, federal agents announce investigation into Dr. Rathborn's clinical trials across 3 states. She turned to Brendel. "You ready to finish this?" Brendel nodded. "Let's bring it home." 6 weeks later, the city's skyline had begun to shimmer with holiday lights. But the real illumination was happening inside conference rooms, courtrooms, and classrooms, where the ripple effect of one father's refusal to stay silent had grown into a wave. The name Brendel Nally had become synonymous with justice, and not because he ever wanted it. Because he earned it. And now the finish line was in sight. The Department of Health and Human Services, alongside the Office for Human Research Protections, announced a sweeping investigation into Dr. Henry Rathborn's clinical trials conducted over the past 10 years. Whistleblowers had begun stepping forward. Lab techs, assistants, even former students, corroborating the unethical treatment of trial participants, especially low-income families of color. One former research assistant even testified that Rathborn's team had pressured patients to sign consent forms without explaining long-term impacts, and some consent records were forged entirely. The agencies promised accountability. And for once it wasn't just talk. With the scandal erupting nationally, Belrose Medical Center had no choice but to rebuild from within. Celeste Monroe was appointed as the new chair of the board. Her first act? She made the lacNally Pediatric Access Fund a permanent fixture with a starting investment of $1.5 million, and pledged to increase it annually through state partnerships and grants. Brendel was hired full-time as its program director. Ayanna was promoted to Director of Clinical Integrity and Patient Advocacy, a newly created position with oversight over every department's ethical compliance. But more than the titles, it was the philosophy that changed. No child would ever again be turned away because of a lack of insurance, paperwork, or protocol. At Columbia Medical School, Marcus Lynn gave a keynote talk during Ethics Week. In it he said, "If you're training to heal, you have to be willing to see. To see the families ignored, the children used, the quiet voices. And if you're not willing to lose comfort for truth, don't put on the white coat." His speech was later printed in the New York Times under the title, "The Cost of Silence in Medicine." Dr. Rathborn was subpoenaed to testify before a congressional subcommittee on research ethics. In a twist of irony, he now required pro bono legal defense after Belrose revoked all severance and benefits. With multiple lawsuits pending, including one from the Department of Justice over fraudulent billing practices, his future looked bleak. He tried to go on television again, but no one invited him. The public had decided. The Miracle Mind had become a cautionary tale. Brendel and Caleb no longer lived in the motel. They moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment provided through a city housing initiative connected to the fund Brendel now ran. On a quiet Saturday morning, Brendel stood in the living room, sipping coffee as Caleb colored on the floor nearby. On the wall above the couch hung a framed photo. Ayana, Brendel, Caleb, and Celeste cutting the ribbon at the lacNally pediatric care wing. 2 weeks later, Caleb's school invited Brendel to speak at their community assembly during Health and Wellness Week. He was nervous. The room was packed with squirming children, teachers, and some parents. He walked up to the mic and looked down at his son, who gave him a thumbs up with his juice box in hand. Brendel smiled. "I'm not a doctor," he began. "I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a dad who wanted his son to be okay. And when I realized that the system wasn't built for people like us, I decided I wouldn't stay quiet anymore." He paused, scanning the crowd of young faces. Never let anyone make you feel small because you don't have money or connections or fancy clothes. You are not less. You matter. You belong. The room was silent. Then applause, small at first, then thunderous. Ayana sat in the back, tears in her eyes. That night, Brendel received a letter in the mail with no return address. Read, "Mr. Nally, I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know. I remember Caleb now. I remember his smile, his quiet bravery, and I hate that it took losing everything to see the truth. I built my name on children like him. And now that name is gone. Asterisk. HR." Brendel folded the letter. He didn't tell Caleb. Didn't reply. Instead, he placed it in the back of his filing cabinet behind the papers that now bore his name and Caleb's. Because it was never about revenge. It was about restoration. On a spring day the following year, Brendel walked Caleb through the new wing at Belrose, now bustling with children, nurses, and volunteers. They passed a mural near the entrance, painted by local artists. It featured smiling kids of every shade, stethoscopes, protest signs, and in the center, a man and his son holding hands under a banner that read, "Every breath matters." Caleb looked up at his dad. "Can we get lunch now?" Brendel laughed. "Yeah, buddy. You earned it." They walked out into the sun side by side. Not victims. Not forgotten. Victorious. Please subscribe and share.